hadn't seen Jake in 10 years, and honestly, I wasn't expecting to. The last time we were in the same room, he was holding hands with my fiancée. Now, he was holding a cocktail glass and wearing a lanyard that read Senior Marketing Strategist, Velentech. We were at the Summit of Innovators, a multi-day conference filled with panels, networking mixers, and too many overpriced coffee carts. I was invited as a keynote speaker. He clearly wasn't. I noticed him before he noticed me. He hadn't changed much. Same smug smile, same just one of the guy's energy that used to get him into rooms he didn't deserve to be in. I turned back to the conversation I was having, half listening to a founder pitch me their startup when I heard it. That voice. The voice I used to associate with loyalty, with late-night beers and inside jokes. Well, Ethan Quinn. Didn't think the big leagues would let you in. I turned. There he was. Jake. Grinning like he'd just caught me off guard, like he still had that upper hand. I smiled, not because I was happy to see him, but because I wasn't angry anymore. That confused him. I could tell. He glanced around, maybe expecting me to fumble, to retreat. Instead, I reached for the glass of champagne from the bar table beside me and took a slow sip. Jake, I nodded. Still trying to sneak into places you don't belong? His smile wavered, just a little, but he recovered quickly. I was invited, he shrugged. Guess they're lowering the bar. Before I could respond, I felt a familiar touch on my shoulder. Elise. She stepped beside me, elegant in a deep navy dress, her presence quiet but commanding. Her eyes met mine first, calm, steady, then shifted to Jake. Hi, she said, offering a hand. You must be Jake. Jake blinked. Yeah. And you are? His wife. Silence. I watched it land, the way his eyebrows lifted, the flicker of recognition in his eyes, the shift in posture, like the air had been knocked out of him just enough to crack the performance. She smiled again. Not smug, not forced, just real. He's told me about you, she added. Enough. And just like that, he had nothing to say. Funny how that works. 10 years ago, I was 2 months away from getting married. I had the tuxedo picked out, the Airbnb booked for our mini honeymoon, and the final RSVP list narrowed down to 87 people. Sophie and I had been together since sophomore year of college. She was funny, brilliant, a little impulsive, but I loved that about her. And Jake? Jake was my best friend since high school. He was going to be my best man. We were a trio. Movie nights, double dates, spontaneous road trips. We did everything together. They were the people I trusted most in the world. They knew every corner of me, my wins, my losses, my weaknesses. So, of course, I didn't see it coming. The night it all unraveled wasn't dramatic. There were no slammed doors or screaming matches. It was a quiet Wednesday. I was working late when my phone buzzed, an email from a colleague at another firm. No subject line, just a message. This came up in a group chat. Thought you should know. And an image. Sophie. Jake. Sitting close together at a rooftop bar I'd never seen before. His hand on her thigh. Her head tilted toward his, laughing in a way that felt too familiar. At first I stared at it like it wasn't real. Like maybe it was photoshopped. Maybe there was a context I didn't understand. But deep down, I knew. I'd been feeling it for weeks. Sophie had been distant. Her smiles didn't reach her eyes anymore. Jake had been dodging my calls more often, canceling plans last minute. All the signs were there, I just didn't want to believe them. I went home that night and sat on the couch in the dark for hours, didn't text her, didn't call him. When Sophie walked in around midnight, I didn't say anything. I just showed her the photo. Her face went pale. Ethan, Don't, I said quietly. She didn't cry. Neither did I. There was a kind of pain that sat too deep for tears, like something hollowing you out from the inside. I packed a bag that night and checked into a hotel. I didn't go to work the next day, or the day after that. I didn't answer texts from friends asking about the wedding. I canceled everything. The venue, the catering, the dress she never got to wear. I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone the truth, so I just disappeared for a while. And Jake? He didn't even reach out. Not once. No apology, no explanation, just silence. That was almost worse than the betrayal itself. Knowing he didn't even think he owed me a conversation. I kept thinking, was it always going to end like this? Was I just the placeholder until they figured it out? But no matter how many questions I asked, I got the same answer from the universe. Nothing. So I did the only thing I could. I left. I transferred out of the company where Jake and I had both worked, moved across the country, took the first job I could find, spent my days staring at spreadsheets and my nights wondering how people could lie with such ease, and slowly, the numbness became focus. I buried the pain under 14-hour workdays, gym routines, and a calendar that never had space for heartbreak. People thought I was moving on. The truth? I was just trying to outrun the version of myself that I once believed in them. New city, new job, new version of myself. That was the plan. I moved to Seattle with 2 suitcases, a severance check, and a desire to feel nothing. I wasn't looking to start over. I just wanted to forget. Forget Sophie's laugh. Forget Jake's voice. Forget the version of me that trusted too easily. For the first 6 months, I lived like a ghost. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. I took a contract job at a mid-sized edtech company. Long hours, low pay, but it kept me busy. That was all I needed. Something to fill the silence. I didn't go on dates, didn't make friends. My coworkers called me the phantom behind my back. I didn't care. Then came the promotion. Then the project lead. Then the email from a venture fund. And before I knew it, I was being offered seed capital to build my own product. Something I'd quietly been prototyping during late nights with takeout and cheap coffee. I called it BrightMind, a student-focused platform that blended AI and emotional coaching and to support academic confidence. I didn't just want to build tech. I wanted to build something that mattered. Funny how heartbreak can be a brutal teacher. By year 3, we had a small team. By year 5, we had our first round of Series A. Suddenly I was being interviewed, quoted, invited to speak at conferences, and yet I still avoided July 15th. That was supposed to be our wedding date. No matter how far I ran, a part of me stayed frozen in that hotel room, staring at the ceiling, wondering why love could betray you so quietly. It wasn't until Elise that something shifted. We met at a leadership panel. She was speaking on emotional resilience in high-growth teams. I was in the back row, half listening, checking email, until she said this. If you're still bleeding over what someone did to you years ago, they're still holding the knife. That one sentence hit me like a punch to the ribs. After the panel, I found her at the coffee station and blurted out, "That was brutal in a good way." She laughed. "Comes from experience." We didn't flirt. We didn't exchange numbers. But 3 weeks later, we ran into each other again. Same venue, different event. This time we talked longer, about work, books, what keeps people up at night. She wasn't like anyone I'd known before. Elise was sharp, warm, disarming. She didn't try to fix me. She just listened. We started meeting for coffee every few weeks, then dinner. Then she invited me to a jazz night where she barely looked at her phone and asked real questions like, "What do you miss about who you used to be?" No one had ever asked me that. Being around Elise didn't feel like falling in love. It felt like coming back online. She noticed things, like how I paused every time someone mentioned trust, or how I flinched when a server said, "You two look like a great couple." She didn't push, but she stayed. Eventually, I told her everything about Jake, about Sophie, about the silence that came after. She didn't interrupt. She just nodded and said, "You didn't deserve that, and you don't have to carry it anymore." We weren't in a rush. It took over a year before we even talked about moving in together, another before we married, and even then, we kept it small. Just 20 people, a cabin in the woods, and no white dress. Just a blue one, and the sound of our laughters echoing through pine trees. Elise was the kind of partner who reminded me daily that love isn't about intensity. It's about safety. With her, I never had to wonder, never had to chase, never had to shrink myself to make her comfortable. I wasn't afraid of losing her because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being alone. I'd already lived through the worst version of heartbreak, and I survived. Now, I was living proof that healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens quietly. In Sunday mornings, in shared grocery lists, in moments where you catch yourself smiling and realize the past doesn't own you anymore. So when the invitation to speak at the summit came in, I said yes, not for the exposure, not for the prestige, but because for the first time, I wasn't avoiding the possibility of seeing someone from my past. I didn't need closure anymore. I had something better. A future. The ballroom buzzed with forced laughter and a polite ambition. Everywhere I turned, there were blazers, name tags, and champagne being topped off by servers who moved like shadows. I just wrapped up my keynote. It went well, clean delivery, a few quotable lines, and enough nods of approval from the front row to know I had made my point. I wasn't looking to impress anyone. Not anymore. I made my way toward the corner of the room seeking quiet. Elise was across the floor, mid-conversation with a woman from MIT's Innovation Lab. She was graceful as ever, animated, yet composed. She had a way of making people feel like their words mattered. That's when I saw him. Jake, hair slicked back, a tailored blazer that tried too hard, laughing a little too loud at a joke that wasn't funny. I would have recognized that forced charisma anywhere. Right behind him? Sophie. She looked elegant, older, maybe a little thinner, hair curled, dressed simple but expensive, and in her eyes, something different. Not confidence, not even guilt, hesitation. I stepped behind a decorative column, not to hide, just to pause. 10 years, 10 long years. And there they were, together, just like before, the perfect picture of betrayal. Only this time, it didn't burn. Jake hadn't seen me yet, Sophie hadn't either. I could have walked out the side door and skipped the whole thing, but I didn't move. Instead, I took a sip of water and let the moment unfold. Jake turned. His eyes landed on me, and there it was. Recognition. He grinned. Well, well, Ethan Quinn. Didn't think the big leagues would let you in. I gave him a slow smile, not smug, just steady. Jake, I said. Still faking your way through the room, I see. His grin twitched. Sophie finally turned and froze when she saw me. Ethan. My name in her voice felt like an old key trying to fit into a lock that no longer existed. Before I could say anything, I felt a soft touch on my shoulder. Elise. She stepped beside me with that quiet power of hers. No makeup armor, no exaggerated charm. Just presence. She reached out a hand toward Jake. Hi, you must be Jake. He blinked. Yeah. And, you are? His wife? 2 words, that was all it took. Sophie's posture shifted. Jake tilted his head slightly, trying to assess whether this was real, whether I had really moved on, or just pretending. Elise turned to Sophie, still calm. And you must be Sophie. I've heard a lot about you. She let the words hang, then added gently, Not all of it good. Jake chuckled, trying to regain control. Wow, okay. Someone's feeling bold. Elise didn't flinch. I just believe in saying what others only think. Listen, Jake said, raising his hands a little. It's been a long time, no hard feelings, right? None, I said honestly. But don't confuse peace with forgetfulness. That shut him up. Elise looked at both of them. It's funny, really. If you two hadn't made the choices you did, I might never have met Ethan. So, thank you. That landed harder than anything I could have said. Jake's jaw tightened. Sophie looked away. And in that silence, I realized they didn't need to be punished. They were already carrying the weight of what they'd done. And standing in front of us, 2 people who had rebuilt from the ruins, they couldn't deny it anymore. Elise glanced at me. Want to step outside for some air? Yeah, I said. Let's. We walked past them without another word. I didn't need to look back. Some things don't deserve second glances. Out on the terrace, the air was cool, clean. The city glowed below, but it was quiet up here, peaceful. Elise leaned on the railing beside me, eyes scanning the skyline. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. More than okay. You didn't need to prove anything. I know, but I think they finally saw it, who I've become, and who you are. She smiled. Their chapter ended a long time ago, but ours deep. We're still writing it. I reached for her hand. Best plot twist of my life. And in that moment I knew. Revenge was never the point. The point was becoming the version of myself they never thought I could be, and doing it without needing their apology. About 2 weeks after the summit, I got an email I didn't expect. Sophie. The subject line was blank. The message was only 3 lines long. I saw you. You looked good. I hope you're happy. I never got the chance to say it before, but I'm sorry. I didn't know how much I needed to see you that night. I stared at the screen for a moment. Not because it hurt, not because it brought anything back, but because I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no bitterness, no old sparks. Just peace. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That version of me, the one waiting for closure, for some magic sentence to make it all make sense, he didn't exist anymore. I closed the laptop and went to sit out on the back porch. Elise was already there, feet propped up, sipping hot tea and reading a book on emotional resilience. Fitting. She glanced up when I sat next to her. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Sophie emailed." She raised an eyebrow, not jealous, not concerned, just curious. "And?" "She said she's sorry, that seeing me helped her realize something." Elise took a sip of tea, then looked at me again. "Do you feel any different?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I feel it done. Not in a cold way. Just done." She smiled. "That's what healing looks like." There's this myth people believe, that closure comes from the person who hurt you. They think if they say the right words, if they cry or explain or beg, the pain will lift. But I've learned something different. Real closure doesn't come from them. It comes when you stop needing it. When you realize they no longer get to define how your story ends. Jake and Sophie were a chapter in my life. A painful one, but just a chapter. The man I was back then, he would have replayed that email 100 times, wondering what it meant, what she really felt. The man I am now. He shuts the laptop and walks outside to a woman who chooses him every single day. Without question, without games, without doubt. My life isn't flashy, but it's real. We wake up early on Sundays and walk the trail near our house. We host dinner nights with people who make us laugh until we cry. We fill our home with books, candles, and calm. Sometimes I still think about the past, but not with regret, with clarity. That pain, it shaped me. Those losses, they forced me to grow, and in some strange way, I'm grateful. Not for what they did, but for what I did after. Betrayal changes you. It makes you question everything, your worth, your judgment, even your future. But if you let it, it can also refine you. It can teach you to choose better, to love slower, to expect more. Healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering without breaking. And the greatest revenge? It's not a dramatic confrontation. It's living a life so whole, so full of love that the people who broke you don't even recognize you anymore because you've become someone they could never destroy. And if you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, what helped you heal? I'd love to hear your story. Let's talk in the comments.